Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to COASTER-net Update. We've got some breaking news out of San Antonio, out of Fiesta, Texas. Danny, the rumor and speculation season is back after a year and a half absence. We've had nothing to speculate.
And isn't it appropriate that it starts off with one of the parks that seems to tease something every year, whether it's important or not, whether it's big or not? It seems like Six Flags Fiesta Texas is always one of those parks that's teasing something. But to be fair, they are also one of the Six Flags parks that seems to get something that's pretty neat every year.
Yeah, and you know what? And they have a team down there, that really likes to do this sort of teaser campaign stuff, whether it be something big, something small. But they've launched their teaser campaign here this past weekend.
And June is early, too. I mean, typically Six Flags, we don't get an announcement until around Labor Day. It's usually a chain-wide announcement. I mean, this is a little early for some teasers yet.
This could be a long, drawn-out thing, and it could point to it being something that they're going to need to start. Usually when you see teasers early, sometimes, I won't say a lot of times, but sometimes that means that the project is going to require them to start working during the season, during haunt, so that you would start seeing construction. So they start their teasers to get kind of ahead of the game here. And what we see here is a few pictures that are posted on the Fiesta Texas, Twitter. And one, you see a bunch of haunt characters, steampunk characters, that are reminiscent of their last edition, Daredevil Dive, which is a classic Six Flags name that's used throughout multiple parks in the chain. But this was for their air race flat ride that was steampunk themed. And one thing that Fiesta Texas has been really doing well is really theming rides well, trying to add that extra ambiance, even going back and fixing the theming on older rides that the park president was also tweeting about possibly fixing or adding theming to Poltergeist as well. And they've been trying to add like queue line experiences to things over the years. So just having a standard air race ride wasn't good enough. It had to be steampunk themed. And they really went all out on that theme. And if you've seen pictures of that, you can obviously see it's really, really cool what they did with that ride. So here you have a bunch of theme park steampunk characters that are holding a 2020 or 2022 balloon. But then there's also this gate that says, let me open up my Twitter real quick. And I forgot the exact wording of it. Oh man, I thought, I had it. Now I lost it. Look at this. What?
Hey, you lost it there.
Who's running this operation? Like, come on.
Well, it's been a while, Andy. I mean, we're out of practice again, work life, baby life.
I know, right? Like things are completely different this teaser season. It says
you finished up school. You went to Cedar Point for a week. I went down to Six Flags Over Georgia, finally rode Twisted Cyclone, went to Hollywood Nights. It's been busy again.
It's been a busy year already. So it says 2022, the gates of fear will open. So
it's haunt related. That's it.
It could very well be haunt related for all we know at this part. So if you just
what's that thing up in at La Ronde?
The Maison Rouge. Yeah. So they have a year-round haunt there. And
do they still do that?
When I was there, they did. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
So looking at Google Maps a little bit, we're looking at the area between Iron Rattler and the new Daredevil Dive. That this picture of this gate, if you go on the Six Flags map or go on Google Maps, you'll see that there's the Sundance Theater, and then there's a road right next to it. That's where this gate is. That this area has been kind of closed off. That they really don't use the theater very much, to my knowledge. And then you have this other amphitheater called the Lone Star Lils Amphitheater, and that's currently being used as a Diamond Elite Lounge. So this whole area is not very heavily traveled. And behind the amphitheater, there's a sizable piece of land. And that's where you can see this gate is. That's where you can see the picture is. It's taken from right next to the Sundance Theater. It's shooting a little bit. You get a little clip of the amphitheater, and then you can clearly see the skyscraper in the background. So some people,
I mean, this land is significantly bigger than the plot of land needed for Wonder Woman.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's probably about the size of the land that's needed for the Roadrunner Express mine train coaster, maybe even a little bit bigger than that still, and that's a fairly spread out ride.
And honestly, and that's without even taking anything out. Now, if you start talking about removing either of these two theaters or amphitheaters, now you're talking about a much more sizable piece of land. I don't think that's going to happen, although maybe starting this early, maybe that is going to happen. I have no idea. Some people have speculated, is it the Gerschlauer on the side of the quarry wall? Based on this picture, I don't see how that's even possible, like getting anywhere near the quarry wall, unless it's a complete, throw off here as well.
And that's always the grain of salt we talk about with these teasers. If the teasers are to mean something, it's for the folks who run the teaser campaigns. If you just give us random shit that doesn't mean anything and then you stump everybody, that's not a good teaser campaign. A good teaser campaign, some people figure it out. Not everybody, but some people get it right, or at least very close to right. So again, we like to work off of the...
Even if you don't
like to work off the assumption that these teasers mean something and they're not just stupid shit.
Yeah. And it's not always that you get everything right. Like one person might get this piece right. One person might get that piece right, that somebody's getting it right somewhere. And if you put them all together, then okay. Well, this is clearly the explanation of it. Like you said, just throwing out random crap here and there, like that's not a good teaser campaign. That's just nonsense. So so we're working off what we have here. So we have the location on this midway, an area of the park that they've been trying to revitalize with the Daredevil dive, maybe expanding into this other area, maybe taking down one of these amphitheaters. But looking at what Six Flags has done, especially at Fiesta Texas over the last few years and across the whole chain, I'm thinking you're not looking at like a Giga Coaster here. You're not looking at a Hyper Coaster here. You're probably looking.
No, they've moved away from the large investments like that. I mean, yeah.
And I think you're looking at something moderately sized to small size. We know that Six Flags has been working with S&S lately. We saw them install Max Force at Great America a couple years ago. And
all the free flies.
Exactly. We know S&S just developed this brand new Axis coaster that would also fit the Fiesta Texas MO because they love to install prototypes at that park. They got, the first S&S free fly. What else did they do? The prototypes. Is that the only one? Is that the only example?
Well, I mean, S&S themselves has done they did Steel Curtain just recently. So I don't know. Could they be going somewhere as far as like a looping coaster goes? I don't know. Well, let's assume for a minute that's a coaster. I mean, think about
is it probably a safe bet at this point. I don't know if I would put all my money on coaster, but I think you should put a lot of money on coaster.
I mean, we had Wonder Woman in 2018, so it has been a couple of years. But I mean, you think about where they've done work. We got Wonder Woman there in the back left when you walk in, back there. Batman kind of went in the middle of the park. They did the Pirates ride, the dark ride there, which is over kind of there by Wonder Woman, closer to Pandemonium and Poltergeist in the boardwalk area. They did the Skyscraper, which is backed by Superman, and now they just did the Daredevil dive flying machine. So it seems like they're working their way back to where they started with Iron Rattler. The whole I don't want to call it resurgence, but sort of the growth of Fiesta Texas really, I think, began when they did the RMC treatment on Rattler into Iron Rattler, and they sort of slowly made their way all the way across the park. From west to east, and now they're going back to where they started, back to that area they haven't touched in a while, it seems. But let's talk about what kind of coasters they have. I mean, you've got two RMCs. You've got Iron Rattler, which is sort of your airtime speed coaster. You got Wonder Woman, which is a bit more of your compact looping coaster. You've got Superman, which is your bigger, your big boy looping coaster. You've got your spinning coaster, your family coaster, if you will, in Pandemonium. You've got your launch coaster in Poltergeist. You've got your Boomerang. You've got your inverted coaster in Goliath. Your Batman clone. You've got your Mine Train. So, I mean, that's a lot of different coaster genres that are there. So, I mean, I think a Max Force where it's like an extreme launch coaster might make some sense. I mentioned, Steel Curtain, where you've got this big multi-looping coaster. I don't know if that seems like a good fit with rides like Superman, Wonder Woman, Poltergeist, and quite frankly, Iron Rattler already going upside down. Goliath goes upside down. It seems like a non-looping coaster would be a better fit. Quite frankly, Andy, what they're really missing, especially since Iron Rattler, is a wood coaster.
Absolutely.
But the problem is, really, as far as RMC goes, we've only seen them take the one shot with Goliath on the wood coasters. I mean, Six Flags hasn't really been building the wood coasters, even with the advent of the RMCs. And, there's all the rumors about whether or not the topper track is even going to be a thing anymore. It's been taken off the website, right? And is it perfectly clear whether or not that's all together or just as like a refurbishment tactic, or is that like topper track altogether seems like it's gone?
From all indications from the website, it seems like topper track is officially dead. And people have said that RMC's kind of hinted at that in the past. So I think RMC's all in on the Iron Horse track and the new single rail track. And I just don't think that they have, and plus with the price of wood right now, like it seems to be crazy to talk about building a wood coaster, because you're probably paying almost double for the wood coaster at this point. Like I don't know if prices are going to go down in the next few months before you actually start building, but I would imagine that wood coaster in that area probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you really tear out places there. If you tore out the amphitheater, then I could say wood coaster, okay, you could do a GCI. But like you said, Six Flags has no relationship with anyone other than RMC. And if RMC's not doing it, then are you going to GCI? Are you going to Gravity Group? Are you going to, somebody else? I just don't see that happening. So
let's rule out wood coaster. I mean, what are some of your other options? I mean, wing coaster and flying coaster are obvious genres, but I mean, Six Flags hasn't been working with B&M in a number of years now, it doesn't seem.
Well, a company they just recently worked with is Premier with West Coast Racers. I know you already have a launch coaster, but you don't have a racing coaster.
And you don't have a modern launch coaster. I mean, let's face it, Poltergeist is, late 90s. Yeah. So, I mean, we're 20 plus years removed from when Poltergeist was state of the art. I mean, still a fun ride, but.
Yeah. So I West Coast Racers everyone has said that has been a pricey addition to Magic Mountain. Fiesta Texas is not a place where they've put in a lot of new stuff like Wonder Woman, like Batman, like Iron Rattler, like cutting edge technology at the time, but they haven't really broken the bank on anything either. So putting in something like West Coast Racers might be cost prohibitive. I don't know. Plus you're doing loops again. That's why I keep going back to this Axis coaster thing and not really knowing what the Axis coaster even does. We only saw the prototype coming out of IAAPA that one year. So like, we really don't know.
That would seem to fit the Fiesta Texas mold. They were the first to do a free fly. They were the first to do the Raptor. They were second to do the Iron Horse. I mean, but generally, I mean, they have kind of been at the forefront. It's almost like they're sort of the test park before they go to Magic Mountain with something, right? Yeah. I mean, there's all these rumors about a very, very large single rail coming to Magic Mountain now. So, they experimented with the free flies before they prance them out to pretty much every other park. The RMCs obviously were very popular. So I think there's at least a little bit of a smoking gun there, perhaps, that they might pioneer it.
And I think if we just look at the history of who Six Flags has worked with, I think your answers are Premier or SNS. Are there any other companies, unless they're going outside the box here? Like they've only worked with Premier, SNS, and RMC over the last 7 to 8 years, right?
Yeah, and the problem is, we've said for a number of years now since Wonder Woman opened that Fiesta could really try to be the first park that had an RMC of each type if they went with a topper track wood coaster. But for all intents and purposes, that doesn't seem like that's going to be a possibility anymore, at least for a park that doesn't have a topper track wood coaster already. And, that would pretty much just leave Great America at that point, and they're still too short from that milestone. So we're not getting that anytime soon. But I think RMC's kind of out. So if you're going with SNS, I think SNS and Premier, I think if I had to put my money on both, I think I'd be flipping a coin.
I would tend to side with SNS just because of the costs of the rides, that SNS coasters tend to be on the lower cost side. And I think that a lower cost coaster makes more sense for Fiesta than a $20 million investment.
And let's think about this. I mean, we did West Coast Racers at Magic Mountain, and then we turned around and did we do Max Force the following year? Max Force was 2019. When was West Coast Racers the same year?
They were both announced the same year, right? And then Max Force.
But then West Coast Racers didn't open until January of 2020, and then it got shut down. So West Coast Racers was a 2019. So they were both announced in 2018, I think it was, and then they were both supposed to open in 2019. West Coast Racers didn't open until early 2020. So, I mean, there's very few people that have even ridden West Coast Racers at this point still, and we're 3 years removed from it. So I guess, if you go back to that, I guess it's just equally as likely, I suppose.
Well, and like I said at the top of the show, Fiesta Texas is a place that even with their Joker flat ride, with Daredevil Dive, they really like to theme out these rides now. So putting in a $20 million ride that has very little theming, like I know West Coast Racers has a little theming to it. I would assume that they're going to pick a smaller priced ride like an SNS, something $14 million, and then maybe spend $1 million on theming to really make it look cool. And based on these teaser campaigns, maybe.
Well, and let's think about this for a minute too. If they're going with the whole steampunk theme, they really tricked out that Daredevil Dive ride to look very steampunky, and there's a lot of moving parts on that ride. You could do a lot of cool theming with the gears, and it could look very mechanical. The Axis coaster could very much be that same thing where, you could do the whole flying machine type of thing that you would see. It would almost feel a little bit too similar to the Daredevil Dive flying machines, but you could very easily theme it very similarly and sort of bring together that little bit of theming there, right? I mean, that coaster type would lend itself to that type of theme if they were to theme it.
It's, the other thing too is like, it's strange that these teasers are steampunk. And I wonder if there's a second thing going on here, that if maybe this teaser campaign is actually teasing two things that are happening, because maybe the fear thing plays into the Axis coaster possibly. But you're in an area that's very Old West. So putting a steampunk overlay onto that whole area, I guess Iron Rattler kind of fits that. Like if you want to like kind of retrofit everything into steampunk, Iron Rattler, you already have the steel snake. You could probably, add some theming onto your raft ride if you wanted to. You could actually go all in on the steampunk theme in that area of the park if you wanted to, I suppose, right?
Yeah, I think you could. Like we said, they started with Iron Rattler and they kind of worked their way to the eastern part of the park, and now they're kind of back where they started with Iron Rattler many years ago. And that front half there is very Mine Town theme around Iron Rattler and Roadrunner Express, but there's nothing saying. I mean, there's a Chop 6 back there, according to this. There's a train station. There's a Johnny Rockets. I'm looking at Google Maps, and I haven't been to the park in 3 or 4 years, so I could be off with what some of these things are. But I mean, it seems like the theming kind of stops once you get past Iron Rattler's queue area a little bit. I know some of those shops are Western themed, but I mean, I think you could easily do something steampunk, and it almost blends itself into where Skyscreamer is there. That path isn't tremendously themed. It goes from where Daredevil Dive is to where the Skyscreamer is, and then you're into like Superman and more of your DC stuff. So I don't think it's terribly unrealistic that you could sort of gradually work your way into a different theme there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just looking at some of the pictures here, and it's
it's almost like a timeline. You go from like American West to like the more steampunky type
and they
thing.
definitely did that whole parade down that whole midway from like Roadrunner Express all the way down past Daredevil Dive.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see what they do here. I think right now we're working on very limited information. But hopefully we're onto something. I'd love to see an access coaster because that thing looked really cool when that prototype was running. So I'd love to see what you could actually do on a larger scale. If it's just the prototype, then but doing that and adding in more elements and making it bigger would be really impressive, I think, as a roller coaster, hopefully.
Oh yeah, for sure. I agree.
Well, we will keep you updated. I'm sure Fiesta Texas will be sending out more and more teasers as we go here. But we are back into announcement season. Hopefully we're going to get a few more here soon. Soon.
That would be nice.
It would be nice to get some more announcements coming out here.
We know that we're probably not going to get a whole lot of teasers from the SeaWorld and Busch parks this year. So let's enjoy it from what we get from Six Flags and Cedar Fair this year, because we already know what's opening in 2022 at all the SeaWorld parks.
Sure looks like it at this point, right? Like if you ain't opening it yet, I got news for you. It ain't happening. So
those of you planning September trips to Florida,
not looking good right now for sure.
No, it's not.
So as always, thank you for joining us here. I'm of course Andrew Barchak from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, Right Warriors.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.